I'm Logan Crawford, and right now on Spotlight, we're speaking with a very talented author. Her name is Christine Groethe, and she has written an amazing book. It is called Unbreakable Spirits, Narratives and Stories of Resilience from Women Who Have Escaped Early Marriages in Mexico. This insightful book delves into the deeply entrenched Hispanic traditions in Mexico that encourage young adolescent girls to leave their homes at early ages for arranged marriages. We're delighted to have this talented author join us here today on Spotlight. We ask viewers like you to support writers like her by subscribing to our channel and by purchasing her wonderful book. The links are below this interview. Christine, great to see you here today on Spotlight.
Yes, great to see you. Good morning. How are
Good
you?
morning. This is a phenomenon I had never heard of before, where women in Mexico have arranged marriages and they're forced into them at an early age. How did this first catch your eye? How did you first learn about it?
Just because I have so many family and friends that are Hispanic, and they would share, someone had actually asked to use my rural property for a quinceañera. And I thought, sure, why not? That sounds fun. And then she mentioned, well, it'll be like hundreds of families. We have to approve it with your neighbors, make sure they're cool with that. And it got me thinking, what exactly is a quinceañera? It's a coming of age celebration for young women, which means basically they're stating, hey, they're now an adult woman at 15, because quinceanera means 15. So it's a celebration of their life, but it's also announcing to the world that they're a woman.
Yeah, and that often coincides with marriage?
Yes, and then marriage might follow, depending on the geographical region of Mexico. It might it coincides with upcoming marriage or arrangements. And it's not just the farm communities, it's many communities that do adopt this practice.
So you have women in Mexico just about the age of 15 when young people are making their confirmations and their bar mitzvahs and their bat mitzvahs. They have a quinceanera in Mexico, which is a coming of age ritual. And then it
Yeah.
ends often within a few months or so in marriage, which is an awful young age to commit to a marriage with someone they don't know. It's an arranged marriage, correct?
Yes, so you don't know, possibly. I mean, there may be some situations where they do have an inkling of, hey, this guy's a nice guy, he's good, he's handsome. The preliminary stuff we all have, that they may determine that. There may be other situations where it was just a simple barter, and the person could be older, could be abusive, could already have entrenched alcoholism, or I guess that could even occur in the 20s. I mean, nobody knows.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden they're creating families, maybe 2, 3, 4 children before they're 19. And that's great if you adore and love your partner. But if you're at odds with the partner or having some dispute about your own personal traditions and viewpoints, then you're passing that on generationally to those kids, that your emotions, your traumas, you're fighting. And that, greatly affects communities. If you think, proportionately, if this is 75% of the community, hypothetically.
Now, for your book, you interviewed a number of young women, correct?
Yes, I did. Yes. And I was surprised when I brought up the topic. I worked very long shifts as a nurse, to many women. I have many, many, many hundreds of Hispanic friends, and everybody within their family had a story. They said, oh, yes, that was my grandmother, and this was her story. And they gave me supportive evidence of that they had experienced that. I was like, wow, so this really this is an enigma. It does occur based on their personal testimony.
And this is something that's still occurring. It's not just something that's generational that happened in the past.
No, I believe it is still occurring, and there's still, even in the United States, people are still participating joyfully in quinceaneras, and then joyfully kind of planning for that, the next the marital step. Yes, in certain cases there is an increased focus on education, or maybe in some families they can do both. They can get married and the full, master degree education or PhD. That's a possibility too, but that takes a very ambitious woman, especially if she may be starting a family and she is essentially the head of the family. She's now the cook, role. She's the takes care of the animals if there's animals, regardless of them, and may help. May all of a sudden be designated as the accountant. Just to three of maybe 10 to 20 roles. She's
Mm.
adopting and attempting to go to college and find her own boundaries.
Absolutely. And
Yeah.
these young women, some of whom you talked to or heard from their family members, wanted to or actually did escape those early marriages because they were not a good fit. Tell us a little bit about that. Is that a common story you're hearing, that they got into an arranged marriage at an early age, they were unhappy and then wanted to get out of it?
Well, yes, in that case, yes, they could probably end it if they had the wherewithal and the assertiveness to do so. Like maybe in the first 6 months or a year, they just felt like, wow, this is not working for me. Um, I'm, oh goodness, I'm not going down that path. Then they could choose to perhaps divorce, but then that might interfere with the religious practices, depending
Mm.
on what those are. If it's deeply rooted Catholicism, that could be an impediment, or another religion could be an impediment. Whatever they're associating with, or define themselves as.
Ex-
So, I mean, there's multiple. That's trauma, and so then that might impact the person's future viability to, or even emotional openness to go down that path again. So it's better to put the thought before the marriage in. And yes, there have been people who have escaped by simply not, being debating it, saying, "Hey, I don't want to do that." Being very assertive, very forthright. I simply don't want to do that if they're, able, and if they're heard within their family, of course.
Yeah. What do you hope to achieve with your book? Are you hoping to get some understanding out there, the word out there, empower the women who are
Yes.
put in this situation? Tell us about that.
Yes, yes. So, yes, I'm hoping to build awareness on the subject, and then create, kind of open the door for women to create a more autonomous path before they get to this, or before it becomes a divisive issue within their families. Because think about it, it does impact the family health. It impacts the siblings. It might create fear. It might create anxiety, depression, confusion. Some Hispanic populations have tremendous, not just from COVID-19 trauma, tremendous anxiety and depression. So, what is the root of that? It requires some examination. Is it some of the traditions, or, some of your environmental aspects? I'm sure it's a combination of both. But yes, I wanted to create more awareness for this tradition.
Absolutely, absolutely. What was it like for you writing the book? How long did it take you? And tell us a little bit about the research process.
Yes, and so it was a little bit hard. I listened to all the stories in depth, with my soul. I am a nurse, so a lot of it was at work. People just said, "Oh yes, Miss Christine, I want to tell you about this," and I was so happy to hear, positive endings, some kind of divisive endings at times, just multiple perspectives. I was fortunate to get that over maybe a 8 month period, just listening to women, their stories, how it impacted their families, maybe caused fear with their siblings,
Hmm.
just, and then the success stories too. There is success as well. There were happy families created with this tradition, but just, I want to create some evaluation, assessment of modern life. And this exists in the US, and may exist, it exists in Caucasian cultures, African cultures. It's a phenomenon that needs to be looked at. Creating more autonomous roles for women at that early age, when they're defining who they actually are, over that maybe sometimes 10-year process. So before they make an early commitment.
Yeah, I mean, that's what it comes down to, is what is basically a child or a very young adult able to make such a life-altering decision? 15 years old, you don't know what you want out of life. You don't know how much schooling you want to get. You don't know how many children you want to have. You don't know if you even want to be married, perhaps. So, to be forced into a situation or pressured into a situation is very, very hard to bear, considering we're at an age where we hope women are more liberated than that, right?
Yes, and then so it remains one of these kind of hidden taboos that all women encounter, and many, there's many things we can speak up on and many things we can't, and many things it's kind of like it's an unknown subject nobody really discusses. It's just, hey,
Absolutely.
this is what it is. We're just going to accept it, and that's fine too. But every acceptance requires some debate before you accept a tradition, or and some acknowledgement and maybe some revision too. So all those factors need to be
Absolutely.
considered.
Well, it's being talked about now, and you can read about it now in Christine Grothe's
Yeah.
amazing book. It is called Unbreakable Spirits, Narratives and Stories of Resilience from Women Who Have Escaped Early Marriages in Mexico. It's an insightful book, and it takes a look at a deeply entrenched Hispanic tradition in Mexico that encourages young adolescent girls to leave their homes for arranged marriages. It's an interesting read. It's a great sociological read as well. I think you'll enjoy this book very, very much. Christine, thank you so much for joining us here today on Spotlight.
Thank you so much for reading this book and your patience from start to finish, and um, and learning more about this subject,
Absolutely.
and advocating advocating for this subject. I greatly appreciate it. Thank you so much for having me too today on the
My
show.
pleasure.
I
Great
really
speaking
enjoyed
with
it.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you. And to the folks at home, I'm Logan Crawford, thanking you for your time this time. Until next time on Spotlight.